Hey guys, it's Ro. I got a lot of questions about fondant and how to use it. I have been using fondant for many years on my online baking show, and I've got a lot of tips and tricks for you. So let's get started. Fondant. What is it? Fondant is a type of icing that has a dough-like consistency, usually seen on elaborately decorated wedding cakes or just themed cakes in general. It's very versatile. You can roll it out to cover a cake or use it to mold it into shapes to decorate, like these cute little rainbow cupcakes that I made. Fondant! Do you make it or buy it? The answer is both. You can make fondant at home from scratch, or you can buy it at the store. The advantages to buying pre-made fondant is it saves a lot of time, and you can even buy them pre-colored, which also saves a lot of time and hassle and mess, because sometimes it dyes my fingers a little bit. These are some of those store-bought fondants from my personal collection, and they're in all sorts of colors. We've got red, yellow, green, blue, purple, white, black, and I've got these little multicolor packs. They come in different skin tones and tans and lighter shades of pink, green, blue, and orange. Fondant! How do you color it? I'm going to show you two different ways to color fondant to get any desired color. The first way is super easy. You're just going to take two colors and knead them together. So here I've got some white and I've took black, and you're just going to press them together and then work them together with your hands. At first they will look very separate, but just keep kneading it, and in a little bit it will be gray. Look at that! Ta-da! Now I'm going to show you the second way to color fondant. This way is still easy, but it's a little bit more involved. Right here I've got a piece of white fondant, and then I've laid it on top of a cutting board with a piece of wax paper so that the food coloring will not get all over the counter. The first thing that you're going to want to do when you use food coloring to color your fondant is you're going to want to grease your hands with a little bit of vegetable shortening. So over here I've got a little shortening, and I'm just going to coat my hands like lotion. And you're gonna rub it all the way around your hand, in between your fingers, so that the food coloring won't dye our hands. You're gonna take a little bit of food coloring, and this is a really great way to get custom fondant colors or very unique and specific colors. So here I got a little bit of teal, and then again, we're gonna work the coloring into the fondant by kneading it. And a good reminder is you can use any type of food coloring. You can use a water-based food coloring or a gel-based food coloring. Either one will work with fondant. The first time that I ever dyed fondant was for a Lynx shield cake that I made a long time ago, many years ago, and I got custom grays and the specific colors so that his shield looked identical to the cake. It was pretty cool. Fondant. How do you work with it? I've gotten a lot of questions over the years about how to work with it, and I wanted to share some of my tips and tricks. The first thing is that when you're working with fondant, I like to lay down a piece of wax paper so that it won't stick to your surface. And this is really interesting, you're gonna sprinkle a little bit of powdered sugar onto your work surface. Not to be mistaken with flour. Some of you have written me and you said I sprinkled flour on the work surface and then I rolled out fondant and it got all weird. And so this is really interesting, but you're gonna want to use powdered sugar, not flour. If you wanna roll it out flat to put it over a cake, or you're making some thin designs, you can just take a rolling pin, again, put some powdered sugar over the rolling pin so it won't stick, and then roll it out flat. If you get powdered sugar on the top of your fondant and you want to place it on top of a cake, don't worry. The powdered sugar, you can just brush it off like this. The consistency of fondant is very interesting because the more you work with it, the softer it becomes. So if you're working with your fondant and you're finding it's very sticky, like it's sticking to your rolling pin, or when you're molding it, it's sticking to your fingers, you can add a little bit of powdered sugar to your fondant and work it in. This will stiffen the fondant. On the other end of the spectrum, if your fondant isn't too sticky but it's too firm, like it's been sitting out for a while, or you got a fresh new box and it hasn't been molded before, you can just start working it with your hands. This will take some muscle because sometimes it can get very stiff, but the more you work it with your hands, it will become softer, and the heat from your hands will warm it up. Sometimes when working with fondant, you need it to stick to itself. I like to use a little paintbrush and a dab of water. The water acts as an adhesive. I have done this to decorate many cakes. For example, the Dipper's Hat Cake. I have also used this technique to make rainbows for these cute little funfetti rainbow cupcakes. Lastly, fondant. Can you store it? The answer is yes, and again and again and again. But remember, fondant is a food, so special precautions need to be taken when storing it. If you plan to use your fondant later, you'll want to put it in an airtight container. I like to store mine in these little sandwich bags. Or you can tightly wrap it in saran wrap, whatever you'd like. After you open a new package of fondant, you can reuse it and store it for about 2 months. Or if you make some fondant from scratch from home, again, you can store it for about 2 months. When you're putting it in your little plastic baggie, I like to close it almost all the way and then press out all the air, like this. Sometimes if I'm going to be using the same color a lot, I will double bag it just to make sure that my fondant won't dry out. The last thing about storage is your leftover fondant should never be refrigerated or frozen. You're going to want to keep it at room temperature. I like to keep mine up in the cupboard over here. All right. Those are all my tips and tricks about fondant and how to work with it. I hope you found the video helpful, and I'll be making some more soon. Bye-bye!